Go ahead, go ahead.
Okay. In your analysis, you were talking about a comparison between China and Mexico wages. What do you have that supports that today's wages in Mexico are going to be tomorrow's wages?
The support that we have was in discussions with Kansas City Southern's management. We asked them the very pointed question once we found this: do they anticipate that to happen? And they told us that's where they primarily want to drive their improvement in the operating ratio, by pursuing more expansive growth, specifically in the revenue in the Mexico region. Because of that, they foresee it to continue on that trend, maintaining a competitive advantage, whereas China, that wage rate is going to continue to go up, making them a more lucrative spot for companies to go to.
Are you aware of the hedging operations that the company is taking to protect the deviation from peso and U.S. currency?
Yeah, we are aware. We are aware of the hedge that Kansas City Southern has put in place. They haven't been real forthcoming in providing what the mechanism is behind that hedge. However, in recent talks with management and looking back at the guidance from the earnings releases, we did see that there was a significant hedge in place and there was no significant losses taking place in the USD peso exchange rate.
Okay, thanks.
With the risk of Mexican access, the port problems, and who knows what else, with such limited upside, why wouldn't you recommend a sell and move your capital into something more worthwhile?
Right. Because the growth potential is so huge, specifically in the energy area. With the recent energy reform, that's just happened. This foreign direct investment, based off of guidance we've had from management, is going to flood into Mexico. And specifically in the areas that we show where natural gas, it's right next door. It's in Texas. They're pulling it out of the ground. Just they weren't able to because there was a state-run monopoly. And so now with this reform, it abolishes that monopoly, and so the inefficiency won't go. So the energy is really what we believe is going to be the key driver. There's so many caveats to the automobile that we mentioned, the port and the drug problems they've had, that we really feel that that growth potential in the energy reform is going to be expansive.
You mentioned in your market multiple evaluation you used a 20% premium. Can you explain that a little further? Or why did you arrive at 20%?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, the 20% premium, we essentially looked at two factors. One was firm-specific growth opportunities, like the Mexico story, the automotive growth, and cross-border intermodal, which is actually booming right now, with UPS and FedEx as one of their biggest customers. And then we took 10% as a potential takeover target, KSU being the smallest Class 1, with key competitive advantages in the industry, with the lowest regulatory burden. That is our breakup of our multiple premium.
If I just could further this point just a little bit more, we found that we do believe Kansas City Southern to be a better growth opportunity than the industry. So we didn't want to just match them up with a multiple that's indicative of that. On the flip side, we disagree with a lot of the assumptions management's laid out. They've been so overly optimistic in recent times, so much in fact that there's actually a class action lawsuit against them. So we wanted to make sure we were more conservative in our approach, that we didn't want to match up with the historical leading to our current multiple premium.
So the Oracle from Omaha is interested. He wants to buy the rail. He wants to do a true NAFTA deal. So what's going on? What are you going to recommend? Because he only wants the rails that get you into Mexico. He doesn't want some of this other stuff. What are you going to recommend to management?
Right. Where's it at? No, let's take over. Okay, then just scroll down and find it. Where are those guys? Sorry. There it is. There it is. Well, let's get to it. Jacob, you want to talk about this, the precedent transactions?
Yeah. We've looked at Kansas City Southern as a potential acquisition target. Actually, the rail that fits most complementary to Kansas City Southern is actually Canadian Pacific. Their shares are at all-time highs. We also looked at actually Warren Buffett's deal back in 2008. the multiple was around 8.5. We said, hey, what multiple would it take for Canadian Pacific to acquire KSU? We found that it took 16.6 EV to EBITDA multiple to actually take down that transaction. Now, at the current market price of about $98, that translates into a share price. They need the price to drop to about below $70 per share. So right now, due to KSU's current high valuation, it wouldn't be a very attractive initial acquisition target right now.
There's a lot of capital has been made available here stateside to the MLPs to build pipelines and that sort of thing. Why wouldn't they go south of the border and build pipelines to send that energy on across to El Paso or elsewhere?
Yeah, crude by rail has a specific advantage. One is it delivers crude to the market much more faster. For example, to get crude oil from Canada all the way down to the Gulf at Port Arthur, it takes about 40 days. Crude by rail takes about 5 to 7. It's a big advantage when these oil producers have a glut of oil that they want to get to the market. So that's one key advantage, that they like to use crude by rail instead of the pipelines.
My question is, why do you use the second phase or the stage 2 growth from 2018 to 2027 instead of going for a terminal growth rate?
Absolutely. Specifically because of the growth inherent to Kansas City Southern. When we were conducting our evaluation, if we were to lop off at the 4-year and then provide a terminal growth rate of 4.5%, we feel that wouldn't be a good indication or really a good indicative, be very indicative of how they're going to actually proceed over the next 10 years and then kind of taper that off. So really it was to provide a more realistic assumption in our DCF model, specifically because of the growth inherent in Kansas City Southern.
Could you talk about contingent liabilities as reflected in pension and health care for the railroad?
Right. Their pension liability it's not on the balance sheet. They don't have a pension liability, so I'm not sure where that information is stemming from. Their compensation benefits that they do actually discuss in detail, that's one of their main cost drivers. They have maintained a steady staffing level even throughout much of this growth. Their revenue has more than doubled in the last 4 years, and they've maintained that staffing level in accordance. So they really do focus on making sure that part of their cost component, which is 15.5% currently, the largest component of their OpEx, they really management is really focusing on making sure that stays consistent.
So you highlighted that one of the chief exports from here down to Mexico for purposes of the oil extraction is their frac sand. Now, if there is a significant expansion that's underway in country, what alternative options do they have in country to thereby take away the option of you generating income off frac sand?
Right. Absolutely, the greatest one would be truck transport. Trucking is one of the biggest concerns for the rail industry, and that would be the largest area where that could be eaten away or eroded. So what we're looking for specifically, when does trucking get the advantage? It's over past the 250 or below the 250 miles of transport. When it's greater than that, rail benefits. And so if it's a shorter distance, trucking will benefit. But then also specifically with that frac sand area, if oil prices increase, trucking becomes a less favorable option. That's when crude by rail will really benefit because of the cost component, and with trucking dependent on the oil price, that would be severely negatively impacting them and benefiting KSU.
I think to add on that point too, the frac sand is highly specialized that's used in that hydraulic fracking process. And so for Mexico to have a substitute product to that frac sand that comes specifically down from Wisconsin, which relies heavily on our rail line, I'm not sure there's a real good substitute for the highly specialized sand that's coming down from that area.
Going back to valuation, can you talk quickly about why you equally weighted the two methodologies you went with, DCF and... Oh, well.